Actually, we had a discussion on this issue for a few months back, and we came to know that this SEBI has made a working group and they're working on it. And now this report has come with precisely with one statement that one has to give the comments by 15th of July. Now we have two agendas in front of us, or basically you can say that two questions in front of us as a VANI team, which I want to discuss with you. One was that if you see the whole concept by now, some picture is getting cleared that what exactly the social stock exchange is going to offer. Yeah. So the first thing is that do we need to also discuss that what type of changes we need within the sector itself. My second observation is that we want to discuss also that is there any advocacy agenda for the sector in this whole stock exchange scenario. Everything is changing, especially due to this COVID. The modus operandi of resource generation has become quite challenging for all of us. We have seen that how PM Care has washed out all the CSR and all the situation is going on. So in this, we thought that let's have this conversation, and we have very less time, so I will not take much of your time. And thank you for joining this group. And what we want to achieve by end of today's conversation is two things. Some, rough roadmap for the sector, which can talk about the changes we require in the sector internally in this scenario of social stock exchange. And the second is there any advocacy agenda which we can share with SEBI? So this is the two agenda, and thank you. And Nivedita, over to you to take it forward.
Bringing soul to the stock. This phrase was coined in the meeting that Ms. Jaitley was just telling you about in February 2020, when VANI initiated the CSO dialogue on the social stock exchange. This was immediately after the budget speech of the finance minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, in 2019 July, where she said that she wanted, where she showcased government's intent to bring capital markets closer to the masses to meet social welfare objectives through social stock exchange. So today we shall be discussing about the relevance and the adequacy of these recommendations. Whether these actually are in spirit, are they bringing in the soul to the stock, is something that our speakers today would be talking about. We have four eminent speakers on domain. We begin with Mr. Vijay Mahajan.
Very interestingly, the report, in a sense, goes beyond its remit. And I think the logic is that unless they had addressed some of these issues, the recommendations could be just theoretical. So they have gone beyond their terms of reference. This kind of support coming from the financial sector for these two demands, the fast tracking of 12A, etc., and the longevity of ATG is, I think, to be welcomed. Likewise, from for the donor side, they've said that right now, the other important recommendation they made for NGOs, that as you know, since 2008, there's been this upper limit of no more than 20% income coming from the commercial or semi-commercial income generating activities of NGOs. They can potentially lose their charitable status if the income is more than 20%. And that, in fact, is against the Atmanirbharta of civil society institutions. Next, please. Because the working group had a lot of people from the financial sector, so they've also taken care to suggest things which will benefit the donors and investors. The report is really outstanding in terms of its content and substance. The critique that I have is what I began with, that it has been written by people who are no doubt well-wishers, and some of them have some familiarity with the civil society sector, but it does not have too much of a flavor of the way civil society institutions work today, either in terms of how they do their work or how they, that is how they achieve impact, or in terms of what kind of ways they raise their money. And so the gap between today's reality of civil society sector and what has recommended seems to be quite large.
I would request our next speaker, Mr. Madhavan, to please share his thoughts about the report and also about the way WaterAid is tackling this situation. So over to you, Mr. Madhavan.
So I approached this report with a fairly open mind, saying we're at a fairly critical juncture as a sector in India? And therefore, is there something in this report that offers some light at the end of the tunnel? This is going to favor large organizations. The transaction costs of navigating the regulatory environment to be able to engage with SEBI to even raise money are enormous. I think one of the central parts of this report, and I think though it is not probably the core of what this report was meant to do, but I think one of its greatest values is in the fiscal benefits that it talks about, in terms of amendments to the Income Tax Act, in terms of looking at registrations not for civil society organizations. It looks at changes in CSR. So in terms of what seems attractive would be a pure play social venture fund that can make grants by virtue of the fact that you use this platform for discovery and attracting new retail individuals, philanthropists who want to give money. The second is a mutual fund, and the third is to sort of look at a development impact or social impact bond.
Mr. Sitharaman is the Chief Financial Officer with HelpAge India, and we would like to have his take on social stock exchange, what his thoughts are on the working group report.
The MPOs, of course, need to get more impact focused. Yes, we are organizations who are here for creating positive social impact. So we need to be impact focused rather than spend focused. Unfortunately, the system we have currently is, where you give us an amount of money, you look for the utilization. So it is more finance focused. What is the fund received? What is the spend? So when you're looking at it, measuring it in terms of financial performance, the efficiency and effectiveness of spend, both are hidden when you're just looking at it from the utilization point of view. But when you're looking at it from the point of view of a social stock exchange and the venture capital fund, it is going to be more impact focused. So so you should be looking at it as output, outcome, and impact. That is going to be an important thing. Social sector therefore needs to change their language and their focus.
Right now, I would like to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Charu Sethi, who works with Save the Children, to have her take on the working group report and also on the innovative practices adopted by SAVE in the current times.
From our point of view, from Save the Children's point of view, and my personal point of view also, I do feel that the social stock exchange, the proposals from the working group are really sort of in the right place, in that they have the heart in the right place, and they're really looking at bringing in additionality and access of commercial capital towards the social sector space. The second aspect which we want to concentrate on is patient capital. So we are hoping with these instruments like the mutual funds, all the social venture funds, there would be more appetite for long-term investing. And of course, as I mentioned, the heart of this report is in the right place because they do want to create this supportive environment for NGOs by building in transparency and trust. I think we will need to do, again, sort of an acronym which I coined, a sort of timely ECG for this. So it would be important to look at equity and inclusion, particularly for smaller NGOs. I think most important is that we should embrace this change. We should open up our minds and hearts to say that this is the new normal. And last but not the least, I think which all the organizations are now grappling with is innovate. For example, Save the Children has been sort of experimenting with a lot of these new things, be it in innovations in our programming and how we are delivering the programming on the ground in this new normal through technology-enabled solutions, through remote-based access, as well as how can we use the new funding mechanisms like crowdfunding. That is also something which NGOs will need to keep focusing on. While there is this huge opportunity to social stock exchange, on the other hand, we need to sort of create our own capabilities as well to create innovative fundraising for being fit for purpose for future and ensure, like Mr. Madhavan said, that a lot of us are still existing after a year and we're not gone and done and dusted.
Looping in Mr. Vineet Rai, who's been added on. I didn't know that he too would participate in this meeting. He's a member of the working group on for SEBI, who has drafted this working group report. So, Mr. Rai, if you could take on certain concerns that some of our speakers have shared here, and basis your experience with the consultations that really happened, If you could share your experiences, your discussion points at that point in time.
See, the idea, I think this is my surmise, that the idea behind looking to have SEBI as a regulator means that you need to, and that actually looks into the constitution that Mr. Mahajan talked about, is how do you actually bring money to the sectors? So how do you convert donation into securities was really the biggest challenge in front of us. But ultimately, it was under the legal premise or legal frameworks, it was found to be null and void. So therefore, you cannot convert a donation into security. And then we were trying to then look at what are the other alternatives that can be brought in. Now, a large number of our recommendations are coming from within the constraints of having to have a security and designing it so that SEBI, which is a regulator and has to be very, very cautious about, and they are actually not there to protect the interest of the civil society. SEBI's job is to protect the interest of those who are actually putting in money. And these recommendations, therefore, were designed to make sure that we fall within the frameworks that we are operating on, which also means that this is a very limited intervention. So you see social stock exchange as a limited intervention. This is not the end all or be all of everything that happens in the civil society, but a progressive, positive intervention so that we can actually make things easier. So instead of seeing this as a threat, it should be actually seen that those who understand the deeper aspect of change will be able to divert their capital towards the more nuanced, much more what is invisible to the naked eye, but is visible through a lens which understands the challenge. Now, when you go to the stock market, it will be like the stock market on the corporate side, where people are most concerned about how much money I made. So similarly, the people who will go there will not be the most astute investors. They would be the ones who would want to see a change coming through. This is the way forward, and the social venture funds will have significant and very vast and very broad mandates. And they will have the capability to actually create massive blended finance pools, which will allow not-for-profits or civil society to build significant capacity to use it. And that actually, I think, is a major change that will happen.